They stopped listening to you. Here's how to make them hear you again. Have you ever been in a room and still felt invisible? People talk, laugh, move around you. But when you open your mouth, the world just keeps going, as if your voice no longer mattered, as if, after 50, what you feel is just a footnote. It's not just about being ignored. It's the pain of speaking and not being heard, of carrying years of wisdom, pain, and love, and realizing no one seems to be listening anymore. But today, I want to remind you of something you may have forgotten. Your voice is still there. It just needs space and a moment. Stay with me until the end, because maybe today is the day you're heard again. But first, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. There's something no one tells you about growing older. The more you've lived, the less they listen. It's as if the time that made you wiser also made others more deaf, not in hearing, but in attention, in soul. You start to notice it in the little everyday moments. You try to share something, and within seconds, someone cuts you off. Or worse, finishes your thought. Mum, I already know what you're going to say. This again? They think they know what you'll say before you even open your mouth, as if all you could offer is predictable, as if you're an old song, too familiar to still move them. And the pain of that is silent, because it doesn't come with screams or tears. It comes in the averted gaze, in the absence of questions, in their rush to end the conversation. And over time, you feel it. What's left to you isn't the right to speak. It's the role of reminding, correcting, cautioning. You're no longer a full presence. You're a walking reminder, a body with advice, a caretaker with arms. They look at a woman in her 60s, 70s, and think she is only what she's already lived. They forget to ask what she still wants to live. And what if what they call experience is just a polite way of pushing you aside? There's an image I carry with me, a mother looking at her child, trying to connect, but in his eyes, there's glass, cold, invisible, indifferent. She speaks. He responds, but there's no connection, like she's on the other side of a window, with no access. You're still there, but your voice doesn't make it through whole. And the worst part, you start to wonder if it's even worth trying, if your story still deserves to be told, or if now your role is just to listen to everyone else's. But that question, that ache inside, isn't the end. It's the beginning of something more real, more yours, more alive. You can be heard again, but maybe first, you need to hear yourself again. And that's the next step. We don't always choose silence. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks of time, without us noticing. You begin to speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you already know how they'll respond. With impatience, with that look that pretends to listen, with a reply that feels more like a full stop than a conversation. So slowly, you adjust your tone, pick your words more carefully. Then you start choosing silence. At first, it feels like wisdom, but deep down, it's resignation in disguise. You've learned to avoid confrontation, to tuck your opinions away in your sleeve, to laugh at the right moments and hide your pain at the wrong ones. Speaking became too risky, too exhausting, too pointless, and without realizing, your soul started to shrink, like a flower that hasn't died, but stopped blooming. There are words you haven't spoken in years, truths that stayed stuck in your throat, memories that deserve to be shared, but you've hidden them, even from yourself, out of fear, out of shame, or just plain tiredness. And so, you go quiet. But it's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of abandonment, the kind that weighs in your chest, that makes you forget your own voice, not the one from your mouth, but the one from your soul. There's a phrase that stayed stuck in me for years. It wasn't dramatic, just a small truth, but whole. One day, I wrote it in a hidden notebook, with no intention of showing anyone, but just writing it gave me a piece of myself back, because our voice doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly in the small no's, in the tiny silences, in the times we swallowed what mattered, just to keep someone else's peace. And each time you do that, you leave a piece of yourself on the table and walk away smaller. But even so, Your voice doesn't die. It waits. It holds every swallowed word like a seed. And one day, when you're ready, it blooms again, in its own time, in your way, with your truth. There's a kind of strength no one sees, because it doesn't scream, doesn't shatter, doesn't fall. It bends. It adapts. It carries on. You became that strength, the one who sorts everything out. Who knows where the bills are, where the keys are, what's wrong, and how to fix it. The one who thinks of everyone else before thinking of herself. And the more you give, the more they forget that you have needs too. You became the support beam for the house, the family, the world. But what about when you needed support? Who held you? You were strong for so long, they forgot you feel. Or worse, you forgot. There's a pain that begins right there, in the space where no one asks. And how are you? And when the sadness arrives, you go to the only place where it still feels safe to feel, the bathroom, with the door locked, back turned to the mirror, crying in silence, not even knowing exactly why. It's not one clear sadness, it's an accumulation of all the things you didn't say, of all the things you were told you had to be. And in the middle of it all comes a question that cuts gently. Did they stop listening? Or did I stop showing that I also need to be heard? Because when you only speak to help, to remind, to care, your voice becomes a tool, not an expression, and your pain becomes silence. But you weren't born to be strong all the time. You were born to be whole, and wholeness cries too. It needs comfort. It deserves to be heard without having to teach in return. Your voice isn't just to serve, it's to exist, to move, to say, me too. If you feel this, if you've ever had to hide even from yourself, comment below. I feel it, because sometimes just knowing someone hears you shifts the weight entirely. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. In fact, the louder you shout, the more they shut down, because shouting comes from exhaustion, and exhaustion scares those who've never asked where it came from. But there's another way, quieter, more intimate, more yours. It begins when you return to the center of yourself, not to ask for attention, but to reconnect with what you have to say, without weight, without urgency, without obligation. That's when your voice changes, not in volume, but in origin. Have you noticed how some stories move people, even when told softly? It's because they come from the right place, from depth, from lived experience, from truth. Listening begins when you stop speaking just to teach and start speaking to share. You don't need to begin with grand truths. You can start with a memory, a forgotten detail from childhood, a rainy night you never forgot, the feeling of walking barefoot through your grandmother's house. Stories like these don't demand attention, they invite it. And suddenly, the one who used to hear you with haste draws nearer, asks questions, feels moved with you, because the secret to being heard isn't in demanding, but in presence. They don't need more advice. They need to feel you alive within your words, not as a mother teaching, but as a woman simply being. And when that woman speaks, without shouting, without needing to prove anything, the house grows quiet, because the sound of truth is calm, but no one can ignore it. Sometimes the silence from others isn't rejection, it's just accumulated distance. Emotional distance, built up day after day, with rushing distractions and routines that pile up over what used to be connection. But behind that empty space, your voice is still awaited, still needed, still irreplaceable, because only you lived what you lived. Only you felt what you felt. Only you can say certain things with the truth that lives in your chest. And that's where the key lies. Words start to land again, when they're born from the soul, not from obligation. Maybe the world doesn't need another perfect phrase, but an honest one that isn't trying to convince or teach or knock some sense in, but simply to reveal. There's something beautiful that happens when you speak from the heart, not to correct, but to exist, not to be accepted, but to be whole. The voice that touches is the one that expects no applause, only presence. Sometimes, when no one's listening, your soul starts to scream from within, but deep down, What it really wants is not to be heard by others, but by you. So, even in secret, there's one quiet gesture that can begin to change everything. Talk to yourself. Record a voice message, not to post, not to share, just to listen, as if reconnecting with an old friend. Speak the way you wish someone would speak to you, with care, with pauses, with respect, because your voice was never weak. It was just forgotten for a while, but it still pulses, still sings. And even if no one notices yet, you still have something no one else can say. And that something might be the start of a new connection with them, with the world, but most of all, with yourself. There comes a time when exhaustion becomes a choice, not because you gave up, but because you realize that if you keep trying to be heard the same way, you'll keep speaking into the void. But there's a quiet truth that time reveals. Your voice isn't lost. It's just been waiting for you to return. You spent so many years trying to be useful, balanced, reasonable, that you forgot what it's like to speak just because you are, without a role, without a filter, without a script. And it's at this stage in life, after 50, 60, 70, that the most profound opportunity arises. The chance to say things you never said, to no longer seek approval, to no longer explain, to simply show up fully, inside your words. Because change doesn't start with others. It starts with you. The very moment you decide you don't need to beg to be heard anymore. Because now, you listen to yourself first. You look in the mirror, and don't just see what's missing. You also see what could still bloom. You see that there's time to return, time to be reborn in your own presence, time to speak with calm, with truth, with color. Because sometimes, what changes everything isn't what you say, but how you show up again in your own words. Today, say something that is just yours, without weight, without needing them to understand, without needing them to accept, just to feel that you've come back, and that your voice, even if it doesn't shout, still carries the power to touch, to heal, to exist. You still have time, and your voice still has soul. It's not lost. It's just been waiting for you to return to it. You've been through so much, stayed quiet when you wanted to scream, said I'm fine when you weren't, acted strong when what you needed most was comfort. And yet, here you are, whole in a different way, maybe with some tired parts, some sleeping dreams, but with something inside that hasn't gone out. And even if others stopped listening, even if your words were ignored, interrupted, judged, forgotten, your voice still exists. And the most beautiful part is that now it can come back different, more yours, lighter, freer from the need to be accepted. Because when you truly listen to yourself, without rush, without fear, others begin, even slowly, to listen too. Maybe not the way you hoped, maybe not with the depth you deserve, but something shifts. In the air, in the energy, in the bond. Your voice doesn't need to convince anyone. It just needs to be faithful to who you are. So today, don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect words. Say something that's only yours. A memory, a feeling, a truth you've been holding. Not to teach, not to impress, but to leave a trail of presence in the world. Because there's still time. Time to be heard. Time to exist fully. Time to return to the quietest home you have, yourself. And when you return, your voice returns with you. Clear, calm, real. They stopped listening to you, but now with your soul back, you get to choose what you do and don't want to say. And that changes everything. That's it. If you felt this content touched you at any point, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and see you in the next video.